Maya Richardson stood in front of her dorm room mirror, adjusting her USC film school hoodie for the 10th time. Her hands trembled slightly as she checked her phone again. 3:45 p.m. The red carpet event started at 6 o'clock p.m., but she knew from experience that fans needed to arrive early to get a good spot. This wasn't just any movie premiere. It was the latest James Barrett action film, Shadow Strike. For the past 3 years, Maya had watched every single James Barrett movie, studied his acting techniques for her film classes, and even written a paper about his impact on modern action cinema. His journey from a small-town theater actor to Hollywood's biggest action star inspired her. As a young black woman dreaming of becoming a director, she collected stories of people who had beaten the odds. Maya grabbed her backpack, making sure she had everything she needed. Her vintage movie poster for Barrett to sign, a bottle of water, and her phone charger. Her roommate Sarah looked up from her laptop, shaking her head with a smile. "Girl, you're really going to stand in the LA heat for hours just to meet this guy?" "You don't understand," Maya replied, double-checking her poster tube. "Barrett's different from other action stars. Have you seen his interviews? He's always talking about giving opportunities to everyone, breaking down barriers in Hollywood. Plus, his latest movie has the first female action director in the studio's history." The afternoon sun beat down on Hollywood Boulevard as Maya found her spot behind the barrier. She was fourth in line, right behind a group of teenage girls and an older couple. Perfect position. The next 2 hours passed slowly as the crowd grew behind her. Maya chatted with Lisa, one of the teenagers in front of her, sharing their favorite Barrett movies and quotes. Security teams began setting up the red carpet as the sun started to set. The crowd's excitement built with each passing minute. Camera crews took their positions, and publicists hurried around with their clipboards and headsets. Maya's heart raced when she heard the first screams from the crowd's far end. The stars were arriving. Barrett's co-stars made their way down the carpet first, some stopping to sign autographs. Maya politely asked for their signatures too, but she saved the perfect spot on her poster for Barrett. When his black SUV pulled up, the crowd erupted. James Barrett stepped out, looking exactly like his movie posters in a perfectly tailored black suit. He flashed his famous smile, and camera flashes lit up the entire block. Maya watched as Barrett worked his way down the line. He seemed so genuine, laughing with fans and taking selfies. He was just 5 people away now. 4, 3, 2, 1. Maya's hands shook as she carefully removed her poster from its tube. "Mr. Barrett," she called out, trying to keep her voice steady. "Would you please sign this? Your work inspired me to study film directing." Barrett turned toward her voice, his signature smile in place, but something changed when their eyes met. It was subtle, a slight tightening around his eyes, a barely noticeable hesitation. His smile became fixed, artificial. Without a word, he shifted his body away from her and reached for Lisa's notebook instead. Maya stood there, poster still extended, as Barrett signed autographs for the white fans on either side of her. The sounds of the crowd seemed to fade away. She watched in stunned silence as he spent several minutes chatting and taking selfies with others, carefully avoiding even glancing in her direction again. Lisa turned back to Maya, her excitement fading as she realized what had happened. Maybe he didn't see you," she offered weakly. But Maya had seen it all too clearly. The way his expression changed, the deliberate turn away from her, the careful avoidance. Her cheeks burned as nearby photographers captured the moment, not the obvious snub, but her standing there, poster still hopefully raised, like a fool. She slowly rolled her poster back into its tube, her film school dreams suddenly feeling heavier than before. As Barrett moved further down the line, Maya could still hear him laughing with other fans, his voice carrying clearly, "I always say, everyone deserves a chance in Hollywood. We got to open these doors wider." Maya's hands stopped shaking, but not because her nerves had calmed. A different feeling was taking root. Something stronger than disappointment or humiliation. She pulled out her phone and started recording Barrett's interactions with other fans. Sometimes, she thought, the most important lessons about Hollywood didn't come from film school at all. Maya sat cross-legged on her dorm room bed, her laptop open in front of her. The room was dark except for the blue glow of the screen, which illuminated the tears rolling down her cheeks. It was 2 a.m., but sleep felt impossible. Instead, she found herself watching interview after interview of James Barrett on YouTube. Hollywood needs to change, Barrett was saying in a talk show interview from last month. We need more diversity, more voices, more stories from everyone. The audience clapped, and the host praised him for being so progressive. Maya clicked another video. I came from nothing, Barrett explained to a young reporter. So I always stop for every fan. They're the reason I'm here. More lies. Maya wiped her eyes angrily, remembering how he had ignored her while chatting with the white fans around her. The door creaked open, and her roommate Sarah walked in, returning from a late-night study session at the library. Sarah stopped when she saw Maya's face. Hey, are you still up? Have you been crying? I'm fine, Maya said quickly, trying to close her laptop. But Sarah had already crossed the room and sat beside her. What's he saying now? Sarah asked, glancing at the screen where Barrett was giving another interview about equality in Hollywood. Everything he's supposed to say, Maya replied bitterly. Everything that made me admire him, but it's all fake, Sarah. You should have seen how fast his smile disappeared when he saw me. How quickly he turned away, like I wasn't even human. Sarah wrapped an arm around Maya's shoulders. I'm so sorry, what a jerk. But Maya was barely listening. She had opened her film project folder, staring at her half-finished thesis film outline. It was supposed to be a simple romantic comedy, something safe that wouldn't ruffle any feathers. Now, looking at it made her feel sick. I'm changing my thesis film, Maya announced suddenly, straightening her back. What? But you've already done so much work on the romance script, Sarah protested. Maya was already typing, her fingers flying across the keyboard. This is more important. I'm going to make a film about the fake faces people wear, about how they preach equality in front of cameras but show their true colors when they think no one important is watching. She worked through the night, the story pouring out of her. She wrote about a young artist who meets her idol, only to discover that the mentor she worshipped was wearing a mask all along. She crafted scenes that captured the subtle racism that lived in small moments. A turn back, a dismissed greeting, a smile that didn't reach the eyes. When the sun rose, Maya had a complete outline. Sarah, who had fallen asleep on her own bed, woke up to find Maya still typing. Have you slept at all? Sarah asked, yawning. No time for sleep, Maya replied, her eyes bright with purpose rather than tears now. I have a meeting with Professor Chen in 2 hours to change my thesis project. Later that day, Maya sat in Professor Chen's office, explaining her new concept. The professor listened carefully, her expression thoughtful. It's risky, Professor Chen said finally. This kind of story, if not told perfectly, could come across as bitter or vengeful. But, she paused, studying Maya's determined face, if you can capture the truth of these moments, the way racism hides behind perfect public smiles, it could be powerful. I'll make it perfect, Maya promised. I'm not using this to get revenge. I want to show the reality that people like me face every day. How we have to smile and pretend it doesn't hurt when people reveal who they really are. Professor Chen nodded slowly. Okay, change approved. But Maya, she leaned forward. Make it so good they can't ignore it. Make it so good that the next girl who gets dismissed by her idol will have you to look up to instead. Maya left the office with a new spring in her step. She had 6 months to turn her pain into art. 6 months to prove that James Barrett's dismissal hadn't crushed her dreams. It had given them a new direction. That evening, as she set up her production timeline, Maya's phone buzzed with a news alert. James Barrett's latest film had just broken box office records. She looked at his smiling face in the article photo and felt something shift inside her. One day, she promised herself, she would be the one calling the shots. And when that day came, she would remember how it felt to be the one deemed unworthy of even a moment's attention. 5 years after the red carpet incident, Maya Richardson stood in the back of a crowded theater at the Sundance Film Festival, holding her breath. On screen, the final scene of her third independent film, Silent Smiles, was playing. The audience sat in complete silence, fully absorbed in the story of a young black doctor facing subtle discrimination at a prestigious hospital. When the credits rolled, the theater erupted in applause. Maya's hands shook as she watched people wiping tears from their eyes. This was her third film to premiere at Sundance, but the nerves never went away. Her first film, her USC thesis project about fake mentors, had won the grand jury prize. Her second, about workplace discrimination had been bought by Netflix for $5 million. Maya, Maya, reporters crowded around her as she left the theater. How does it feel to have another hit? She answered their questions with the calm confidence she had developed over the years. No more nervous film student. Now she was Maya Richardson, the director whose films made people both think and feel. Back in her hotel room that night, Maya's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Her agent, David Chen, had been fielding calls all day. "They're calling you the new voice of modern cinema," he said excitedly over the phone. "Universal wants to meet next week. Warner Bros. The week after. You're not just an indie darling anymore, Maya. The big studios want you." Maya sat down on her hotel bed, thinking about how far she had come. Her small apartment in Los Angeles was now filled with awards. Critics praised her unflinching lens and masterful storytelling. But most importantly, young filmmakers, especially young black women, wrote to her every day, saying her success gave them hope. The next morning, Maya sat in a coffee shop with her old roommate Sarah, who had become her production partner. They were reading reviews of Silent Smiles together. "Listen to this one," Sarah said, grinning. "Richardson doesn't just direct films. She holds up a mirror to society's comfortable lies. Her latest masterpiece forces us to confront the racism that hides behind polite smiles and empty words." Maya smiled, stirring her coffee. "They have no idea that it all started because a certain action star couldn't even look me in the eye." Speaking of which, Sarah pulled out her tablet. "Guess who's struggling at the box office? James Barrett's last 3 movies have flopped. Critics say he's lost his touch." Maya didn't feel the satisfaction she once thought she would. "Life has its own way of balancing things," she said simply. Their conversation was interrupted by Maya's phone ringing. It was David again. "Maya, cancel your afternoon. Steven Spielberg wants to have lunch. He saw your film last night and couldn't stop talking about it." 2 hours later, Maya sat across from one of her filmmaking heroes at a quiet Beverly Hills restaurant. Spielberg leaned forward, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Your understanding of human nature, the way you capture those small moments of truth, it's extraordinary. The industry needs voices like yours." "Thank you, sir," Maya replied, still amazed that this was her life now. "I just tried to tell stories that need to be told." "Well, I have a proposal for you," Spielberg said. "How would you feel about directing a big studio film? Something with a real budget behind it." Maya's heart raced. This was the opportunity she had been working toward. What kind of film? Action thriller. $100 million budget. Full creative control. He slid a script across the table. "We need someone who can bring depth to the genre. Someone who can make it about more than just explosions." Maya opened the script with trembling fingers. As she read the title page, her eyes widened. The lead role was already cast. James Barrett's name was there in black and white. Spielberg mistook her expression for hesitation. "I know action might seem like a departure from your usual style." "No," Maya interrupted, a slow smile spreading across her face. "It's perfect. Sometimes the best stories come full circle." That evening, Maya stood on her apartment balcony, looking out at the Hollywood Hills. 5 years ago, she had been a heartbroken student, crying over a celebrity's snub. Now she was about to become that same celebrity's director. Life really did have its own way of balancing things. She pulled out her phone and called David. "Tell Spielberg I'm in. And David, let's keep my history with Barrett quiet for now. I want him to walk into this project not knowing anything about his new director." Maya adjusted her blazer as she walked through the glass doors of Apex Studios. The security guard checked her ID and gave her a visitor's badge. "Conference Room A, 35th floor," he said with a smile. He had probably seen her picture in the entertainment news. Everyone was talking about the young director who might save Apex's troubled action movie. In the elevator, Maya checked her reflection in the mirrored walls. At 31, she looked different from the starstruck student who had once waited for an autograph. Her hair was styled in neat braids, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew her worth. The elevator dinged at the 35th floor. Rebecca Torres, Apex's head of production, met her at the conference room door. "Maya, thank you for coming." They shook hands warmly. Inside the room, 8 executives sat around a large table, all wearing expensive suits and eager expressions. "Everyone, this is Maya Richardson," Rebecca announced. Though she hardly needs an introduction after silent smiles swept the Indie Award circuit. Maya took her seat at the table, placing her laptop in front of her. She had prepared for this meeting all week, but nothing could have prepared her for what she saw next. There, projected on the wall, was James Barrett's face, his headshot for the troubled production they wanted her to save. "As you know," Rebecca continued, "our film, Shadowfall, has hit some roadblocks. 2 directors have already left the project. We need someone with a fresh vision, someone who can bring depth to the action genre." Maya's heart pounded, but her face remained professional. She opened her laptop, pulling up her presentation. "Tell me more about these roadblocks." The executives exchanged glances. Finally, one of them spoke up. "Our star, James Barrett, has strong opinions about how his character should be portrayed. The previous directors struggled to work with his creative input." Maya almost laughed. "Of course he did. I've studied Mr. Barrett's filmography extensively," she said, her voice steady. "His early work showed remarkable vulnerability beneath the action hero facade. That's what I'd like to bring back." The executives leaned forward, interested. Maya clicked through her presentation, showing storyboards and mood references. "The script is solid, but it needs more emotional weight. The action sequences should serve the character development, not overshadow it." "That's exactly what we've been looking for," Rebecca said excitedly. Then her expression became careful. "But Maya, we should be upfront. This is a $100 million production. Your indie films are brilliant, but this is a different world." Maya smiled. "Ms. Torres, every film I've made has come in under budget and ahead of schedule. I know how to manage resources. More importantly, I know how to get authentic performances from actors who might be set in their ways." The meeting continued for 2 hours. Maya answered their questions with confidence, showing them exactly how she would transform their troubled production into something special. When she finished her presentation, the room was silent for a moment. "Just one more thing," an older executive said. "Have you met James Barrett before? He can be particular about who directs him." Maya's mind flashed back to that night on the red carpet, to the way Barrett had dismissed her without a word. "No," she said smoothly. "I haven't had the pleasure of meeting him personally, but I'm familiar with his work." Rebecca stood up. "Well, I think we've seen everything we need to see. Maya, would you mind stepping out for a few minutes while we discuss?" In the hallway, Maya took deep breaths to steady herself. Through the glass walls, she could see the executives talking animatedly. After 10 minutes, Rebecca opened the door. "Maya," she said, beaming, "how would you like to direct Shadowfall?" Maya shook hands with everyone, accepting their congratulations with grace. As she left the building, she checked her phone. She had a text from Sarah. "How did it go?" Maya typed back, "I got it. Starting next month, I'm James Barrett's new boss." She stepped into the sunshine, feeling a mix of emotions she couldn't quite name. 5 years ago, Barrett hadn't thought she was worth 10 seconds of his time. Now, she would be directing every move he made for the next 6 months. Maya flagged down a taxi, already making plans in her head. She would be professional. She would be fair. She would make a great film. And if Barrett happened to learn some humility along the way, well, that would just be an added bonus. The production office of Shadowfall buzzed with activity on the first day of pre-production. Maya arrived early, setting up the conference room for the first full team meeting. She arranged the storyboards on the walls, each one carefully showing her vision for the film. Her assistant, Tom, rushed in with coffee and schedules. James Barrett just pulled into the parking lot. Tom whispered. His agent says he's in a mood because his last movie only made half its budget back. Maya nodded calmly, though her heart beat faster. Make sure everyone has the new script copies and shooting schedule. The door opened, and James Barrett walked in. He looked older than Maya remembered, with touches of gray in his hair and tired lines around his eyes. He still carried himself like a star, wearing an expensive leather jacket and designer sunglasses. He didn't look at Maya as he took his seat, busy typing on his phone. "Good morning, everyone," Maya said, her voice clear and confident. "I'm Maya Richardson, your director. Let's start with introductions." Barrett's head snapped up at the word director. He looked at Maya, then around the room as if expecting to see someone else. Maya continued the meeting, introducing key crew members and outlining her vision for the film. The heart of this story, she explained, pointing to the storyboards, is about a man learning to trust again. Every action sequence should reflect that emotional journey. "Excuse me," Barrett interrupted, speaking for the first time. His voice had a sharp edge. "I've been playing action heroes for 20 years. I know what works. The audience wants explosions and fight scenes, not emotional journeys." Maya met his eyes directly. "Mr. Barrett, your best performances have always combined action with emotion. Think of Night Runner or Steel Heart. That's what we're aiming for here." Barrett's face flushed slightly. He clearly wasn't used to being challenged. Those films were different. This is a straight action movie. And who exactly are you? I'd never heard of you directing anything like this before. The room grew tense. Everyone knew Maya's reputation in the industry, even if Barrett didn't. Sarah, now Maya's production partner, stepped forward with a tablet. "Actually, Mr. Barrett, Ms. Richardson's last 3 films won major awards. Her latest film, Silent Smiles, has a 95% rating on Rotten Tomatoes." Barrett waved his hand dismissively. "Indies, art films. This is $100 million action movie. It's different." Maya remained calm, though inside she was thinking of that night years ago when he had waved her away just like this. "You're right, Mr. Barrett. This is different. That's exactly why the studio brought me in. They want something fresh, something that will surprise audiences." She walked to the storyboards, pointing to a particular sequence. "Look at this scene. Yes, there's a massive chase through downtown Los Angeles. But it's not just about the explosions. It's about your character realizing he's been betrayed by his own government. The action serves the emotion, making both more powerful." Other crew members nodded in agreement. Barrett looked around, realizing he was losing the room. He forced a tight smile. "Well, it's an interesting take. But I should warn you, I have script approval, and I'm not sure this direction works for me." Maya smiled back, equally tight. "The studio has already approved my vision for the script, Mr. Barrett. They're particularly excited about the emotional depth we're bringing to the character. But I'm always happy to discuss your thoughts on the role. Shall we set up a one-on-one meeting tomorrow?" Barrett stood up abruptly. "My agent will be in touch." He walked out of the room, letting the door slam behind him. The room was silent for a moment. Then Tom whispered, "That went well." Maya turned to the rest of the crew. "All right, everyone. Let's continue with the production schedule. Mr. Barrett may need time to adjust, but we have a film to make." As the meeting continued, Maya noticed people looking at her with new respect. They had seen her stand her ground against a Hollywood star without losing her composure. She had shown them what kind of director she would be. Later, in her office, Sarah brought her a coffee. "You okay? That must have been intense." Maya looked at the storyboards on her wall. "You know what's funny? He still doesn't recognize me. He has no idea that the fan he dismissed years ago is now his director." "When do you think he'll figure it out?" Sarah asked. Maya smiled. "When the time is right. For now, let's focus on making this the best film of his career, whether he likes it or not." 3 weeks into filming Shadowfall, the crew gathered on set at 5 a.m. They were shooting a crucial scene where Barrett's character discovers his partner's betrayal. Maya sat behind the monitors, watching Barrett prepare for the emotional confrontation. "Remember?" Maya called out. "This isn't just about anger. It's about hurt, betrayal. Your character trusted this man like a brother." Barrett paced in front of the camera, his jaw tight. The makeup artist touched up his face while he glared at the script pages. "This scene is too talky," he complained. "My character would just punch him and be done with it." Maya stood up and walked over to him. "Mr. Barrett, your character has worked with this partner for 15 years. Violence is easy. Real drama comes from the pain beneath it." The crew watched silently. Over the past weeks, they had gotten used to these tense exchanges. But they had also seen something else. Under Maya's direction, Barrett was giving his best performance in years. "Action!" Maya called from behind the camera. Barrett started the scene, confronting his partner about the betrayal, but instead of following the script's emotional build-up, he rushed straight to the physical fight. Cut. Maya's voice was firm. Mr. Barrett, we need to do it again. Follow the script this time. This is ridiculous, Barrett exploded. I've been doing this longer than you've been alive. The audience doesn't want to see me cry. They want to see me fight. Maya took a deep breath. Everyone take 5, she announced. Then to Barrett. My office. Now. In the small production office, Maya closed the door. Barrett stood with his arms crossed, looking like an angry teenager despite being in his 50s. Do you know why the studio hired me? Maya asked quietly. Because they're trying to be progressive, Barrett snapped. Trying to look good by hiring a young black female director. Maya didn't flinch. They hired me because your last 3 movies flopped. Because audiences are tired of seeing the same old action hero who solves everything with his fists. They want depth, Mr. Barrett. They want to see the human being behind the muscles. Barrett's face reddened. You can't talk to me like this. I'll call the studio. Go ahead, Maya replied calmly. Call them, show them the dailies from the scenes where you actually followed my direction, then show them the scenes where you didn't. They'll see the difference. She walked to her laptop and pulled up footage from last week. On screen, Barrett's character had an emotional scene with his daughter. He had fought Maya on it at first, but finally did it her way. The performance was raw, real, vulnerable. This, Maya said, pointing to the screen, this is why they hired me, because I can get this from you. Barrett watched the scene, his anger slowly fading. For the first time, he really looked at Maya, studying her face. Something flickered in his eyes, a hint of recognition, quickly dismissed. Fine, he said finally. We'll do it your way, but I still think you're wrong. Back on set, they reset for another take. This time, Barrett followed the script. He let the betrayal show in his eyes, let his voice crack with emotion before the fight began. When he finally threw the punch, it meant something. Cut. Maya called. Print that one. Moving on. The crew burst into applause. Even Barrett's agent, watching from the corner, nodded approvingly. Maya caught fragments of whispered conversations. Best work he's done in years, and she really knows how to handle him. Later that day, Maya reviewed the footage in her office. Sarah brought her coffee and take-out dinner. That was amazing, Sarah said. The way you handled him. Maya smiled tiredly. He's not a bad actor. He's just forgotten how to be vulnerable. Too many years of playing the same tough guy. Still no sign he recognizes you? No, Maya replied, but that's okay. This isn't about revenge anymore. It's about making him face the truth, not just about who I am, but about who he is. Sarah squeezed her shoulder. Well, the studio executives are thrilled. They're saying this could be his comeback film. Maya looked at the frozen image on her screen. Barrett's face captured in a moment of genuine emotion. Maybe we're all getting something we need from this film, she said softly. Him, his comeback. Me, my big break. And maybe, just maybe, both of us are learning something about prejudice and pride along the way. The screening room at Apex Studios was packed with executives for the first test showing of Shadow Fall. Maya sat in the back row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Next to her, Sarah squeezed her arm supportively. James Barrett sat several rows ahead, his posture stiff with tension. As the film played, Maya watched the audience's reactions more than the screen. They gasped at the action sequences, but more importantly, they leaned forward during the quiet moments. When Barrett's character broke down after losing his daughter in a mission gone wrong, she heard sniffles throughout the room. The lights came up, and the test audience filled out their response cards. Maya held her breath. These early reactions would determine the film's marketing campaign and release strategy. An hour later, Rebecca Torres burst into Maya's office, waving the results. Maya, these are the highest test scores we've seen in 5 years. 92% said they would definitely recommend it to friends. And look at these comments about James's performance. Maya read through the audience responses. Powerful. Best performance of his career. Finally, an action movie with heart. Made me cry 3 times. The studio is thrilled, Rebecca continued. We're moving up the release date to take advantage of the Oscar qualifying window, and the press junket starts next week. Maya's stomach tightened. The press junket meant 3 days of interviews with Barrett, sitting side by side, talking about their collaboration. She wondered if he would finally recognize her. The junket was held at the Four Seasons Hotel. Reporters cycled through every 15 minutes, asking the same questions about how they worked together, how they brought depth to an action film. James, one reporter asked, your performance is being called a career renaissance. What was it like working with Maya? Barrett smiled his practiced smile. Maya brought something fresh to the genre. She pushed me to dig deeper than I have in years. And Maya, as a first-time blockbuster director, were you intimidated working with such a big star? Maya met Barrett's eyes. Actually, Mr. Barrett and I had met once before, years ago, at the premiere of Strike Force. Barrett frowned slightly, trying to remember. Maya continued, I was a film student then, waiting for an autograph. You were too busy to sign it. The color drained from Barrett's face as recognition finally dawned. The reporter, sensing a story, leaned forward. Oh, tell us more about that meeting. But Maya smiled professionally. It was a small moment. What matters is the work we created together now. Between interviews, Barrett pulled Maya aside. His face was ashen. That was you? The girl with the poster? Yes, Maya said simply. Funny how life works out, isn't it? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you make it harder for me on set? You had every right to. Because this film wasn't about revenge, Mr. Barrett. It was about proving something, to myself, to you, and to every other person who's been dismissed because of how they look. Barrett slumped against the wall. I've been horrible to you, both then and during filming, and you still drew this performance out of me. That's what good directors do, Maya replied. We see the potential in people, even when they don't see it in others. The next batch of interviews went differently. Barrett seemed humbled, genuine. When reporters asked about their collaboration, he spoke about Maya's talent and vision with real respect. That evening, Maya found a note in her hotel room. Inside was a copy of the old Strike Force poster she had wanted signed years ago. On it, Barrett had written, to Maya Richardson, thank you for teaching me to see beyond my prejudices. You've made me a better actor and a better person. I'm sorry it took me so long to learn. Sarah called as Maya was reading the note. Have you seen the early reviews? They're calling it a masterpiece. Variety is predicting Oscar nominations for both you and Barrett. Maya looked at the poster, thinking about how far they had both come. You know what's funny? She said. 5 years ago, all I wanted was his autograph. Now I've helped him write the best chapter of his career. And yours, Sarah added. What are you going to do with the poster? Maya smiled, picking up the signed poster. Frame it. Not to remember the hurt, but to remind myself that sometimes the best revenge is success. The Critics' Choice Awards ballroom glittered with Hollywood's biggest stars. Maya sat at her table, wearing a beautiful purple gown designed by a young black designer from Chicago. Sarah sat next to her, clutching her hand under the table. James Barrett was seated 3 tables away, already wearing the Best Actor award he had won earlier in the evening. And now, the presenter announced, the nominees for Best Director are... Maya watched her face appear on the giant screens around the room. The clip they showed was from the behind-the-scenes footage. Maya directing Barrett in the emotional scene that critics had called the heart of the film. She looked confident, professional, and completely in control. The winner is... The presenter opened the envelope, and a huge smile spread across his face. Maya Richardson for Shadowfall. The room erupted in applause. Sarah hugged her tightly, crying happy tears. As Maya walked to the stage, she saw Barrett standing and clapping, genuine respect in his eyes. She remembered standing outside that premiere 5 years ago, feeling small and worthless. Now she owned the room. Wow, Maya said, holding the heavy award. This is incredible. She pulled out her prepared speech notes, but then put them back in her clutch. This moment deserved words from the heart. 5 years ago, I was a film student with big dreams. Like many young people, especially young people of color, I faced doors that seemed permanently closed. There were people who couldn't see past my age, my gender, or my race to recognize what I could offer. The room was completely silent, hanging on her words. In the audience, Barrett shifted uncomfortably in his seat. But tonight isn't about closed doors. It's about opening them. It's about proving that talent doesn't have a color, that vision doesn't have an age limit, and that sometimes the person you dismissed today might be the person leading you tomorrow. Maya smiled, holding up her award. This film taught me something important. Success isn't about getting revenge on those who doubted you. It's about proving to yourself that those doubts never defined you. Thank you to Apex Studios for trusting a new voice. Thank you to my amazing crew who believed in my vision. And thank you to James Barrett. Barrett looked up, surprised at being mentioned. James, you took a chance on a different kind of action film. You opened yourself to vulnerability and gave the performance of your career. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit we were wrong and allow ourselves to grow. After the ceremony, at the governor's ball, people kept coming up to congratulate Maya. Young directors asked for advice. Studio heads pitched projects. But the most meaningful moment came when an elderly black woman who worked as an usher at the theater approached her. "I've been watching these awards for 30 years, the woman said, tears in her eyes. "Never thought I'd see someone who looks like us up there winning for an action movie. My granddaughter wants to be a director. Now she knows it's possible." Later that night, as the party was winding down, Barrett approached Maya's table. He looked humbled, a far cry from the arrogant star who had dismissed her years ago. "That was a gracious speech," he said quietly. "You could have exposed me, told everyone how I treated you that night. Why didn't you?" Maya looked at her award, thinking carefully before answering, "Because this journey was never about shaming you. It was about proving something to myself, and maybe along the way, helping others see their own prejudices more clearly." Barrett nodded slowly. "Well, you've certainly succeeded. Every studio in town wants you now. And, for what it's worth, I hope I can be in your next film. This time, I promise to sign any autographs you want." Maya laughed. "Thank you, James. But I don't need your autograph anymore. I got my own name to sign now." As she left the ball that night, Maya stopped to sign autographs for the fans waiting outside. She took extra time with each one, especially the young people of color. She looked each of them in the eye, asked their names, and encouraged their dreams. Sarah watched her with pride. "Look at you, changing the world one autograph at a time." Maya signed the last poster and smiled. "No," she said, "I'm just making sure no one else has to prove themselves the hard way. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success, it's using that success to open doors for others."